Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Digitizing Carrier Connectivity. We are really glad that you could make it and you could take out your time, your busy schedules to join us for this, what we think very important and an interesting topic about the digitizing carrier connectivity. So a very warm welcome from around the globe, because I know we've got some people from other countries as well. So first, let me introduce myself. I am Ronald Meijering, and I am responsible for marketing at Descartes in the Benelux, and I will be your host and moderator today, meaning that I mostly will be behind the scenes, making sure that our technique is doing what it's supposed to do, and also for any questions that you might have. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them during the session. There is a question mark button on your right that you can use to raise any questions that you might have. That could be technical issues, hopefully not, but hopefully more in-depth questions about the content that is going to be presented by my two wonderful colleagues, Eric and Arthur, and whom I will introduce in a second. So questions, feel free to put them already in the system. What we will do is we will have the Q&A session at the end. So we expected the presentation part from Eric and Arthur to be around 40-45 minutes. So that will leave us for about 15 minutes for the Q&A. So you can hold your questions until that moment or already put them in the system. Whatever you want, they will end up with me, and I will hold them till the end, and then we will, of course, get them answered as good as possible. We will also have two questions for you, but that will be very self-explanatory during the presentation. Practical thing, the session will be recorded. That is important because we want to give you the option to maybe look at the recording again, or also share that with colleagues that you think might be interested in the topic as well. So I think that about sums up the practical parts, and yeah, then it is my pleasure to introduce my wonderful colleagues. Erik Geerts, Director of Product Management from TMS, Carrier Connectivity and Ports. He's been with Descartes over 10 years in different roles, product management, product strategy, and his current role for over 3 years. So he's very knowledgeable on this specific topic for this webinar. And on my other side is Arthur Laschuit. He has been with Descartes over 8 years. Before that, he was at a logistics provider. So he knows everything there is to know about logistics, and currently as Director Activations EMEA and Asia, he's responsible for connecting carriers to our network. So both my colleagues know everything there is to know about this specific topic that we're going to present to you today. So I think without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Eric. What we will do is we will switch off our webcams so you can view the presentation and have the focus on that, and we will be back with you with some image from ourselves at the end. So Eric, if I can hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. So this is our agenda for today. So one second. I'll first talk about the carrier onboarding challenges and some of the latest trends. Then I will talk about a digital network for carrier connectivity, the value of having such a network. And then Arthur will take over to talk about our proven carrier onboarding process before I will wrap it up at the end. So let's start with some of the common challenges we see on the market. First of all, yeah, you see differences between the modes of transport. You have different players, different message types, different flows. Also, the levels of automation can be different between the modes overall. It's also important to look at the cost of switching carriers, especially in these days. Supply chains can change, and that can also have an impact on the carriers you have to work with. So it's important to be able to switch to different carriers quite easily without too much hassle. Then carrier compliance, it also gets more and more important. Also something to take into account, like making use of carrier compliant labels, looking at latest dangerous goods requirements, looking at different types of validations you need to build into the system when exchanging information with your carriers. Overall, you still see quite some lack of standardization, where we are not the only ones who are saying that or seeing this. Even if you have standards, you still have different flavors. Also there are differences between the modes. For example, in the communication between air forwarders and airlines, it's already much more standardized than, for example, in the communication to road carriers, for example. There are different types of carriers. It's a fragmented market. There are different niches, different sectors. You also have the difference between, like, let's say, the physical carrier versus freight forwarders, 3PL, 4PL, even 5PL, as you can see on this picture. And the difference is that, of course, that they take on a certain scope of services within the supply chain. And on the next slide, I will also show that there are different levels of technology, which also require a different approach. During this webinar, you will also see that it's more than just setting up the technical connection. You have to look at the process, at the business processes, and the different customer requirements that are on the table, actually. So looking at the carrier technology variety, we often use these pyramids to say, okay, you have carriers in different segments. You've got high-tech carriers, medium-tech, and low-tech. What we currently define as high-tech are typically the major players with global coverage, often have their own standards. They often communicate via web service APIs. They have specific label functionality. So here we categorize mainly the express carriers. Actually, here we see that the market starts to change a bit, and that also other carriers in other modes are starting to look at APIs more and more. So this is definitely not a static picture. It's evolving at the moment. Then you've got a very large group of what I would say medium tech carriers. Of course, they're not all the same. These are carriers with, I would call it, EDI capabilities, and I mean EDI in a broad sense, so not only the, let's say, traditional EDI formats such as Edifact or ANSI, but also using the newer formats like XML and in some cases even JSON, for example. They can adopt to standards, or they also have their own defined formats. So it's a large group of carriers in this category, and we've listed a few of them. Of course, we could not list all carriers. And then still a big group of what we could call low-tech carriers. These are carriers without ADI capabilities or connections that you have to set up with a low volume. And there you typically also have other solutions, non-EDI solutions in many cases. Of course, there are always some exceptions. So this is how we can, on a high level, of course, categorize the different carriers. And they require, let's say, also a different approach per type. Then to finish this part, I will talk about some of the latest trends. I already mentioned API connectivity. It's definitely on the rise. I also added a graph to that measures the growth in API since 2005. So you see a very sharp increase. Of course, this doesn't mean that all carriers are using that. We're still far from that point. What goes together with APIs is also the rise of new formats like JSON. It's typically the format used for the new REST APIs, but yeah, you can also use it without really have the full interactive API process. A second trend that we see is that there is definitely an increase in e-commerce and parcel shipping. I think that's probably not a surprise. Of course, that requires to connect to to different types of carriers, and often you also see more strict and more advanced requirements in terms of delivery options, etc. Then the third trend I would like to highlight is the requirement to exchange electronic documents. Then I'm talking about documents like CMR, proof of deliveries, way bills, etc. So there are more and more carriers that are offering the service to send these documents electronically. Of course, you also have the eCMR initiatives that are on the market. So of course, the whole idea is to get rid of paper documents and to also further automate the process and make it more efficient, and in this way also save costs, of course. Then a fourth one is real-time tracking. So yeah, customer demands are rising, and also we also get more and more requests from customers to set up solutions for real-time tracking. So we can, for example, for road transport, we can follow the truck, and not only to just follow the truck, but also to get some more real-time alerts in case there is a delay or something goes wrong, of course. And then also data sharing actually exists for a long time, but we now see also more specific initiatives to share more data between supply chain partners. For example, in air cargo, we're also participating in the One Record initiative, and that's one of the initiatives around data sharing. So maybe as we transition to the next part, it's time for a short poll. So Ronald, can you maybe launch our first poll?
I will definitely launch it. So just a second. Okay, so we have a question for you, and the question is, which modes of transport do you use in your business? And you can select multiple answers.
All right. Shall I continue, Ronald, or shall we wait?
Shall we wait? I think it is currently collecting, so people are busy in putting in their answers.
Well, I'll maybe I continue and then can come back on that.
I think we've got about 60% have voted. So shall I show the answers?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So I will share that with you. So this is what our audience have shared.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you see a good mix of the different transport modes between indeed truck, ocean, air, parcel express, rail, barge. So it's thank you very much for doing that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I thought I had to switch again. Okay, so now in the second part, I'll talk about the value of what we call a digital network and the different services that are provided via such a network. Yeah, to start the story, oh, apologies. Of course, you can, as a company, you can set up connections with your carriers yourself. Of course, you then confronted to with different protocols, different formats, etc. Yeah, probably you've already seen this kind of picture. What we offer with Descartes is a platform, a network that is already connected to carriers, or where new carriers can be easily set up, so that you can actually set up and maintain one connection with Descartes. And then in the background, you've got a whole network of reusable connections. So this provides yeah, of course, different benefits. Think about some of the challenges I talked about, like if you have to switch from one carrier to the other. This is easier if you already have a platform where a lot of carriers are connected to. So the platform that Descartes operates is called the Global Logistics Network. It's an existing platform processing billions of transactions every year. And on this platform, we have actually carriers connected in the different modes. So we have ocean carriers, we have air carriers, we have road carriers. We also have connections for rail and, of course, connection to the express parcel carriers. On the other hand, we also have a lot of intermediaries connected, like freight forwarders, 3PLs. And yeah, of course, from a shipper perspective, a carrier can also be a forwarder or a 3PL. So we also offer that type of connectivity. Actually, carrier connectivity is part of a broader portfolio of what we call logistics messaging or logistics connectivity. So it's not only carrier connectivity, we only have a lot of supply chain connectivity, connection to 3PLs for warehouse processes. So in the future, we'll also organize other webinars that will focus more on these kind of transactions. And on the GLN, so the Global Logistics Network, if you're using your own applications, your own TMS, your own WMS, ERP, we still offer tools to track the messages. So you can look up certain messages. We can set up what we call business keys so that you can look up a message based on a reference that you know, a business reference like a booking reference or your customer reference. This is actually a screenshot of the new GLN track and trace that is being rolled out. Some people might still know the old one, which is still in use. So this will be gradually replaced by the new one. So there's some other add-on services on the platform we can offer, such as carrier-specific validations, such as archiving of messages, such as statistics, overviews, etc. Of course, it's not only about the connection, it's also about the message format. If you look at the market, there are, of course, different standards. And on this slide, you can find some of these standards or organizations that have defined the standards. As I already mentioned, air cargo is quite well standardized. There have IATA, who has come up with Cargo Imp and now with Cargo XML. It's less the case for a lot of other modes like road, ocean, also connectivity to freight forwarders that is less standardized. On the other hand, you've got some new initiatives. If you look at the Benelux market, we've got the standardization organization in the Netherlands that promotes, for example, the open trip model or OTM to exchange events, but they also want to use it, for example, for the transport order. In the first place for road transport, so let's say the delivering goods on a national level, or in some cases, of course, also international. Another initiative is the DCSA, the Digital Container Shipping Association, which has been started by some of the major shipping lines, and that already has quite a few members. So we're cooperating quite often with this new organization to also help them defining future standards. And they're focusing currently on also different initiatives. Because of the lack of standards, or it's not only the lack of standards, it's sometimes also the different interpretations or subsets or flavors. We have defined what we call the Descartes SMF, or standard message format. Depending on the process, we have it in different flavors. What we always have is the XML flavor at the moment. So actually the SMF is a kind of superset of data that is designed to support a specific business process. So we're not only using this for carrier connectivity, we're also using this in other areas such as communication with retailers. So it's actually to come up with a solution for the lack of standardization, so that we can say, okay, we define the superset, and this has actually quite a few advantages. And it helps us to have one standardized connection to all carrier, to offer one standardized connection to customers to connect to all the carriers. We can also more easily reuse carrier connections. When working with SMF, everybody's also internally talks more or less the same language. So we have a rapid deployment switch on effect. It's also easier for our support because it's always, we're always using this format. So how does it then work? If you have to connect to your back office system, which can be a freight forwarding system, a TMS, WMS, etc. There are actually two options. One option, which we prefer, is that you send and receive directly the Descartes SMF. We have currently quite a few projects ongoing with customers that are adopting this. Not only customers but also partners of other systems. So the other option is that we set up a mapping between your customer format and the SMF. And then on the other hand, we've got the connections or the mappings between the SMF and different partner formats. And in this case, it means carrier formats. Actually, we're also heavily promoting the SMF, whether it's in XML or Edifact, to actually carriers. And especially during the last 2 to 3 years, we've invested quite a lot in that. And we see that more or less 65% of carriers is overall, of course, is connected directly on the SMF, and for 35% of the carriers, we still do a mapping. For example, we typically still do a mapping for some of the larger carriers where it's very, let's say, beneficial to have a single link to such a carrier because of the coverage or because of other requirements. But that's actually happening in the background. This is another picture where you can see on the left side, there are all different applications, including a lot of Descartes applications, but also other customer systems or partners like Transplace or SAP TM, where we either send or receive SMF directly, or whether there's still a mapping in front of that. So that's one side of the story, but the big advantage is, of course, that by only setting up carrier connections once, either directly on the SMF or through a mapping, we can actually reuse all these connections for the different applications and customers. And actually, another option we have to connect is actually the Descartes Carrier Portal. It's a web-based application, which is typically offered to the smaller carriers. And actually, they use a web portal to receive transport orders, to respond to it, and to provide status information. So on the next slide, I'll come back in just a second. Before I go to the carrier portal, this is a typical flow, just to give people an idea, okay, which are the transactions you support. This is for road carrier and also connection to freight forwarders, for which we use the same SMF, standard message format. We've got a similar picture for other flows such as ocean, etc. So some messages are not always used, like the pre-booking. In some cases, this is also just an email, a PDF that is sent via email. In other cases, this is an EDI message. Transport orders are sent from the shipper to the carrier. You've got the confirmation back, you've got the statuses, proof delivery, which can be, of course, a status message. Plus, we also we can also receive the signed POD documents. And then on the invoicing side, we also process more and more the freight invoice. And in some cases, we also have the pre-bill. So when the shipper actually sends the amounts to be invoiced to the carrier, so it's the other way around. Of course, that can go further into self-billing. Yeah, one of the things I still wanted to mention is that, of course, if we have a new standard here, like the OTM, Open Trip Model, with this setup, for us, it's actually quite easy to say, okay, let's just map from the SMF to the Open Trip, and then we can also reach the carriers that have already adopted the standard. At the moment, OTM is still a standard that needs to be further adopted by the market. But when that becomes reality, we're actually ready to support that. Yeah, this is the picture of the carrier portal. I already mentioned most of the functionality, so also images like proof of delivery can be uploaded by the carrier. So as I said, this is typically for smaller carriers. We also have a mobile application that carriers can use to view their orders, to respond to it, to report statuses, etc. The last slide for this part of the presentation is about parcel shipping and compliance. I already mentioned this is getting more and more important. So you can see, some of the functionalities we offer. So we can provide rate shopping functionalities via APIs. We provide functionality to the shipping, to confirm the booking, to get back compliant labels. For some carriers, manifesting, including some additional services like electronic trade documents. And then on the other hand, also, of course, getting the tracking events back, the freight invoices. Actually, we can support it in two ways. One way is completely black box, where as for the other carriers, we get a message from you and we actually send it to the parcel carriers for example, the shipping. The rate shopping itself, that's a different API you would then have to call. And actually the second flavor, and of course getting back the tracking, the updates, etc. The other flavor is that you're actually using our parcel compliance applications, and these can provide additional functionalities around label print, automatic label printing, scanning, and other features. But that's, I would say, more a premium advanced solution. We can also offer the, let's say, black box shipping functionality as such. All right, so then to finish basically, and maybe Ronald, it's also good to start launching the second poll. If
yes, just 1 second, I will launch it right now.
Okay, I'll wait a second so that people don't get distracted.
So yeah, we're just curious to see if you've ever set up direct connections to carriers yourself. So if you can vote it, we're very interested to know. Okay, so let me just see how many people have voted yet. I think we have about 3/4 of the questions in. So I'm gonna close the poll and show you the results.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. So you see a mixed picture. So quite a still a relevant percentage that have set up their direct connections, and then another big group or a bigger group that that has used other parties to help setting up these connections. Okay, great. So let's continue. To share my screen again. Okay, here we are. So, I mainly talked about, let's say, the core carrier connectivity for typical transactions like the booking, statuses, etc. On top of that, we also provide add-on solutions, and we also are further investing in these kind of solutions. Just to name three, first, dock appointment scheduling. It's also getting more and more popular to, of course, also automate the process of carriers coming to pick up or deliver the goods. We can offer this or as a standalone solution where it can be very easily activated. Of course, it can also be integrated with your systems. That's also possible. Secondly, the eCMR, we're not using that a lot, but yeah, we're looking. Yeah, we have already set up some integration with other providers like Transfollow. So it's definitely a kind of project we are happy to do with customers to actually digitize the CMR and to get of course the benefits of that in terms of cost savings, etc. And then the third one I want to highlight is real-time tracking. We are further expanding our solution for real-time tracking for road transport. We've got other solutions for air tracking, like on the level of the ULD, for example, just to give one option. And also further looking into real tracking for ocean to further expand in that domain. So we're definitely responding to that market trend and further rolling out our solutions in the different markets, including also in Europe. Okay, so this was basically my part of the presentation. So I would like to hand over to Arthur to further talk about the proven carrier onboarding process that we have put in place since a few years.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So actually, so the more often I hear this story, the more sense is starting to make, right? I mean, people are looking for standards, but also flexibility, and that is exactly what we're doing with that combination of SMF with high tech, low tech, those kind of things. So it's actually a good story. Maybe it doesn't stick, let's say, the first time, but if you hear it a couple of times, it will. But talking about, let's say, that onboarding process, the goal is to bring the customer and the carrier together by bringing in a product, and that product can be the SMF, it can be a TMS, a Descartes or non-Descartes. It really doesn't matter, although we prefer Descartes. But also the ERP or WMS that our customers are working with, but also the TMS or the routing solution that the carrier has, right? So that's all about. That's what it's all about. So the first step, what we tend to do when we start onboarding carriers for a specific customer, is we look at the customer. What kind of scenarios and logistics processes are in place? Can we receive orders or shipments, deliveries, those kind of things? Will those be consolidated, not consolidated? Are dangerous goods in scope, yes or no? All important to get insight into that. We also like to see what kind of messages are we talking about. If we take the example of roads, then it can be a booking, a confirmation back or rejection, status messages, and a freight invoice. Are all of those needed, or only a couple? Important information for us. Same goes for the modalities like road, ocean, air, rail. And if you have, let's say, rail or air or ocean, do you use a freight forwarder for the booking, or do you do it yourself? It's highly unlikely for air, but for ocean it can actually be the case. But also as a customer, there's certain information that you need back from a carrier. Let's say, for instance, you have an agreement with them that they are allowed to send you an invoice for the weight that they have put on their skills. Then as soon as they send back a status message or whatever kind of message, then you would like to have that actual weight back. So that can be a unique agreement, let's say, between a customer and a carrier that we need to make sure that we fulfill it. We also need to find out which events are important for you. Do you only care about pickup and delivery, or also maybe a hub in, hub out? Or in case of ocean, are you interested in full in gate, full out gate, vessel departure, vessel arrival? It can all be included, but it's something that we need to discuss. Same goes for the reason codes. Do you have a set of codes? Does a carrier have a set of codes? Can those be mapped? Should we adopt to one? That's all stuff that we need to figure out. And last part for that customer side is we want to talk about the scope, about the context and the volume. And what do I mean by scope? If you have a certain business unit in Sweden, for instance, and you would like to have carrier DSV onboarded, then that's good to know that it is Sweden. But if you say it's also Romania, then that is important information for us, because it could very well be that DSV Sweden and DSV Romania don't have the same, let's say, back office system. So we need to integrate them maybe twice or tweak a couple of things. So that's why we also always want to know, let's say, the scope. We'd like to have the context of the carriers that you're doing business with, because then we know we're at the right depot. And we'd like to know the volumes. Sometimes you have a heavy carrier that does, let's say, 1 to 5 shipments a month or something. Then the whole investment in EDI or API might not make sense, but a web-based solution, if the carrier is up for it, might make more sense. So those are all questions that we will ask to the customer and that we try to figure out. But it's not all about the customer, it's also about the carrier. They have requirements, they would like to receive certain information to make sure that they can actually execute the transport, and that other messages like the status and the confirmation can be created. But also their capabilities. Where you might think, okay, this is a good carrier for EDI, but if they don't know what EDI is, it might be better to go via a web-based solution, right? And also that information that is needed, like the customer, they have needs as well, and they need to be aware of what the customer needs to know, right? We need to bring those together. We also talk about, let's say, the communication protocol. If we're talking about EDI, whatever is preferred, is it AS2, is it SFTP, or are we more talking about web or API? In case of EDI, we have the SMF is in different subsets. So will it be XML? Will it be ADFACT? Will it be ANSI? We have it all, but it's something that we need to discuss. And then we talk about that product. So we actually bring in a product, right? This is what we call the SMF, which is, let's say, a standard. But there are also other products involved with this. A transportation management system, for instance, can be ours, can be someone else, but can also be something that the customer has built themselves, like let's say an own proprietary TMS, or their ERP, WMS, and of course the same goes for the products on the carrier side. So we don't want to let's say make a lot of changes in those things. We try to fit the pieces of the puzzle together to make it one thing. So the focus here is on the EDI setup, but scope can be broader, as Eric also mentioned in the beginning. We're talking about labels, documents, freight charge calculation, POD attachment. So all depending on the capabilities of the different products in use, this needs to be set up as well. With Descartes transportation management systems, we know the capabilities, all others need to be looked at, but there's always something to find that will make it work. So the outcome of this whole exercise is what we call a carrier pack. This describes all of the topics that I just mentioned. And in most cases, you see that the carrier pack is something that you need to create as a customer, let's say once, unless you have a real specific depot somewhere that is really operating in a different way, then it might be 2 or something. But normally 98% of the information in that carrier pack can be shared with each and every carrier. If you can go to the next slide for me, Eric. Yeah, thanks. So, and then it's all about getting the work started. So the carrier type that you see on the top left side of your screen, that determines the approach, also the pricing, but I won't get into that. We have a couple of different flavors. If you remember that pyramid that Eric showed in the beginning, if it is a web-based carrier and we need to set them up via the Descartes carrier portal, there's not much information needed. We need a person, we need an email address, and let's say not much more, DUNS number, but let's say pretty low request for information in that sense. But if we're talking about a carrier that we're gonna connect via EDI, then there are two flavors. Either it's the one where the carrier will adapt to our SMF, or it's the other way around, where we will do a mapping from the SMF, because we will always put the SMF in between, to the carrier specific format. So in the latter case, what we need from the carrier is the specifications of the messages that are in scope. Ideally a message implementation guide or whatever they have, and it helps if some examples are included. Also works the other way around. If the carrier is going to adopt to our SMF, we share our message implementation guide, the latest version, and some examples of the messages that we want to exchange. Same logic, let's say, more or less applies to setting up ocean carriers. This was just an example for roads. Then we have the carrier pack. So I just discussed that in the previous slide. What that ends up with is some kickoff calls. And kickoff calls are a joint effort between you as a customer, the carrier, and the Descartes team. Scope and the necessity of the project will be part of the introduction. Ideally, we let the customer take care of that. And after that, it should be, let's say, about questions about the carrier pack or the specifications. Sometimes things are clear, sometimes things are not clear. An important outcome of these kickoff calls is the timelines. So these timelines are for the milestones, like setting up the connectivity, the mapping work, user acceptance tests, and production date, of course, and let's say as detailed as possible. So there should be a mutual agreement about these timelines and also how we're going to communicate during this part of the, let's say, the project, the carrier onboarding project. For instance, in the call, we have a communications expert from Descartes' side, we have the communications expert from the carrier side, and they should set a date when the AS2 connection should be set up. Right? And that is added in the project plan, and that is the milestone, and that's going to be reported on. If you can go to the next slide, Eric, then I will explain what will be done to set these milestones. So first one is the communication setup. So the Descartes activation consultant will be in contact with the communication expert, like I mentioned. Under normal circumstances, this is something that can be done, let's say, in a day or maybe 2 days. Sometimes it can happen that on the carrier side there can be something like a firewall setting that is not correct. Some carriers can change that, let's say, in the blink of an eye. Others have processes where they first need approval from IT management or whatsoever. So really, depending on how fast they can act, it can be up and running. That's also the reason why we try to do this, let's say, as soon as possible, because such delay is manageable. It's not that big of a deal if it takes a bit longer, because there's still other things that need to be done. But the sooner we can get it out of the way, the better. If a carrier can support both the test and the production environment, then these will be set up simultaneously. And when you talk about the mappings, so the mappings that are either done by the carrier in case of the SMF or Descartes in case of the carrier specific format. Even when it's the carrier that needs to do the mapping work, so to say, to adapt to our SMF, we reserve time in our planning to make sure that we are on the sideline for answering questions from them. It really depends on the knowledge and the expertise on the, let's say, the mapper on the carrier side, if they understand what is in there. We have a couple of years experience, so in most cases we can figure it out together. And then when the communication has been set up, when the mappings have been created, they have been set up with what we call routing rules in, let's say, the test and also in production. Then we can work on a system integration test, UAT, user acceptance test, and of course the production. It really depends on what the customer and the carrier wants in the whole SIT and UAT process on what needs to be done. At production, we make sure that we have an activations consultant being on standby, being on watch straight away to make sure that at least those first messages flow right through. There's also what we call a hypercare period, where it gets just just a bit more attention, just to make sure that everything is flowing. And as soon as that has been set up, has been, let's say, agreed upon, that everything is live, we will make sure that we hand it over to our support organization, which is as a global coverage, of course, as it is needed for such a product. Let's say in a nutshell, and I think I'm just right on cue, this is what the onboarding process is all about. So I can hand it over back to Eric.
Thank you, Arthur. So we're now moving to the last part of the presentation before we open up to questions. Actually, it's more a wrap-up. Just moving one screen. Oh.
Okay, then in the meantime, Eric, oh, sorry, Eric, one question.
Okay.
I think somebody came in that they had some audio problems. Is that, are there others having an audio problem as well? Or was it just a small glitch? If you have an audio problem, please let me know in the chat. Thank you. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, sorry, I got something strange on my screen, but it has been resolved, I see. So yeah, to finish, we would call Descartes a safe choice for your career project for a number of reasons. Of course, because of our network, Descartes has the largest global logistics network worldwide, covering the different modes. We've got dedicated carrier onboarding teams in the different regions, with actually a lot of expertise in connecting carriers, also helping customers in the process to set up carriers. As I mentioned, single integration to all the carriers for all the transport modes by connecting to the GLN. GLN is a fast, reliable, and secure environment. You've got features like document fingerprint, which uniquely register a transaction so that it cannot be denied later, for example. We've got a fast and proven carrier onboarding process. We can also offer various add-on services. And yeah, also coming back to the different onboarding teams, we've got a global footprint and presence. So not only the activation teams that Arthur is leading, but also the support teams we've got that are available around the clock. And last but not least, of course, our 30+ years of international experience in supply chain optimization, carrier messaging. So we're not a new party in this domain. We've got years of experience with connecting trading partners and also carriers in particular. So that brings me to the end of the webinar, at least before we go to the questions. So back to you, Ronald, and let us know whether there are any questions.
Yeah, thanks. So thanks, Eric. Thanks Arthur. Thank you for this clear explanation. We had a couple of questions coming in, so let me quickly grab the first one. So the first one is there an interface with Microsoft Dynamics Navision, the recent versions?
Let's say we've got no, let's say, adapter or plug and play component to connect to Navision. If I'm correct, we've done already projects with customers that are running this and that have created some files. So I don't know, Arthur, whether you have any other experience with that.
No, not on the top of my head. I think you're right that they are able to connect with our SMF, but don't know much about the details, to be honest. No.
Okay, so thanks. And I think if we need to know more about that, we'll definitely get back to you. I know the person that asked the question, so we'll look into that. Let's see. I've got 3 other questions that came in. So I don't know who's going to take that, but the question is, how long does it take to onboard a new carrier in general?
Oh, that sounds like a question for me, to be honest. So yeah, so like I explained, there are different types of carriers, right? So if we're talking about a carrier that we're going to connect via the Descartes carrier portal, then it can be, let's say, all be done in one day. System setup, including training, of course, depending on resource availability on our side, on the carrier side. So that can be done, let's say, in hours. When we're talking about connecting with the SMF, let's say if the carrier is going to do the mapping, what we tend to say to them is to take 1 message per week, just to be sure. That could give you sufficient time to actually do the work, come back with questions, have a short call with us, and everything. Same goes for the other way around. We also take into account, let's say, 1 week, because we need to have the availability of the carrier. And when you're talking about APIs, it really depends. Is it already in place? Then is there something that you can reuse pretty easily? So it can be set up in a couple of days as well. But there can be carriers around the world that have a whole compliancy program attached to it, and you need to have hundreds or maybe even more test scenarios that you need to run first. Then it can take a bit longer. Then you definitely have to take into account a couple of weeks to sometimes even more. But yeah, that's it's becoming more and more standard, luckily, those things. So it tends to go down.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that is a very clear explanation. So I will go on to the next question that we received. And the question is it still useful to onboard carriers via EDI with the rise of APIs? So I don't know.
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's definitely still useful. Yeah, if you look at the different modes, for parcel carriers, it's already very common to set up APIs for many years to do rating, to do booking, getting labels, etc. However, if you look at the other modes, especially road, air, and sea, it's still not very common. I would say that 90% of the carriers, or even more in some cases, of course, depending on the carriers that you need to onboard and the region sometimes. So more than 90% is still needs to be connected via EDI because they're not ready for API, or API is not available for all the different transactions. So it definitely still makes sense to onboard carriers via EDI. Of course, I mean EDI in a broad sense with all the different formats, XML and etc. So not only Edifact. What we're now as Descartes also doing is to come up with a hybrid solution, so that, for example, you send us the SMF, and we have tools in place to call API in the background to do the booking with parcel carrier, for example, and get back the label. So these are, let's say, I would say hybrid solutions. We'll probably see more in the future. Because we continue to live in a world where you will see the different flavors. So yeah, that's a bit the answer to that question and the approach we're also taking.
Okay, thanks. So there was a new question came in, so I'll pick that one first. And I think that's to you, Eric, if you can explain a little bit more about API and JSON.
Yeah. API or application programming interface is, let's say, a way to let applications talk to each other, and now it's more and more used also to connect trading partners. So of course you've got different APIs. I think one of the in the past you mainly had APIs based on SOAP. These are XML based. APIs, and the last years you see more REST APIs, and they are mostly making use of JSON. So JSON is let's say a new format. It's lighter than XML, so you don't have these the overhead with the tags, etc. And JSON is mainly used in the context of a REST API, but on the other hand, we sometimes also see the use of JSON as just a format, and using other protocols, or not using the typical interactive API setup that you have.
Okay, thanks. And if the person wants to know more about that, we can also of course take that offline afterwards. So considering we have 4 minutes left, I would say we'll do the final question, and then we can probably wrap it up so everybody's back in time. So the final question was, which transport modes have made or are making most progress with automation?
Yeah, I'll start, and then probably Arthur can add some information. So I think I already mentioned that a bit. So Express looks to be most ahead in automating additional processes and providing more electronic services, in many cases in the form of API services. So if going to the other modes, I think the other the freight forwarders are also starting to come up with additional automation and additional services to integrate. So I would put them second, and then after that, you will have, I think, the international modes, air and sea. I think in air there's still there are quite some initiatives, but overall it's I think in most cases the EDI type of communication is still used, but of course that's fine. I think air was probably the mode that started with electronic messages very early. On the other hand, and that's maybe a bit contradictory, you still there were still a lot of paper documents, and I think there are still a lot of paper documents going in parallel. And with the IATA initiatives around e-freight, this is starting to change, but it has proven to take also quite a long time, and it's still not fully completed to get additional processes automated. And then on sea cargo, I think that there are a lot of initiatives these days. Some have materialized, some have not materialized. Sometimes they say ocean is the least advanced. I don't fully agree with that, because you can already send electronic information for many years. Of course, some areas like rating, quoting, etc., electronic documents have not been touched yet. But I think people are starting to think about it. And then road transport. Of course, it depends on the type of player. I think the bigger players, and also quite a lot of the medium-sized, they've also invested quite a lot in automation. So I think there it's a bit mixed, and I think some of the smaller players are maybe struggling a bit more, but also there are of course new solutions on the market that can help them. So I don't know, Arthur, whether you have anything to add to that.
I think you nailed it, Eric. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. You nailed it, and we're on top of the hour. So I think we're just I see it's 3 o'clock, so that's 1 hour precise. So I think it is time to wrap up. I would like to thank first of all our two speakers, Arthur and Eric. Thanks so much for your very clear explanation. To the audience, thank you very much for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We're going to send you the recording, also the details that you can ask us the right questions. Anything that comes up, please feel free to reach out. And as Eric mentioned, we will set up other webinars after the summer on topics related to this. So we'll keep you informed on new webinars that will be around. And for now, I'd just like to thank you and wish you a very pleasant afternoon, the rest of your day, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.